Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on Beck. We were just visiting with Margot Knorr, and she was able to bring in or help facilitate bringing in our next guest, Mark Morano. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to coming to North Dakota for the first time ever. Never been there. So thank you for having me on.
Great. Well, only the best come north. That's what they say.
That's right. That's right.
So, and you got a little bit of snow experience out in the Virginia area this weekend, so you're going to fit right in.
There you go.
That's right. We get that, we get the 30-degree wet snows out here, but it wreaks havoc, as you can imagine. It was so bad that Joe Biden couldn't even depart from Air Force One. They couldn't bring over the stairs. His stairway to his airplane got stuck, and he was stuck on the plane for quite a while.
Don't they have an inflatable slide for him?
I think he's too old for that. He might.
So, Mark, you are the founder and executive editor of ClimateDepot.com. Tell us about that. What made you get started in this?
Well, I've always been an investigative reporter. I like to joke. I'm not a scientist, but I do occasionally play one on TV. But in all seriousness, I'm a political science background, investigative reporter, journalist. And I got involved in the environmental movement as a reporter. And my first issues actually were the old Amazon rainforest scare. I actually did a documentary on that. I've also done wetlands, endangered species, agricultural stories, property rights. But climate, I got involved in about 20 years ago now, and I ended up working in the United States Senate Environment and Public Works Committee and worked for Senator James Inhofe, who's been was one of the only Republican senators standing up. He was a man alone standing up against President Obama, then President Obama's climate agenda. So I worked on that, and we actually won an award on our website. We actually helped I compiled the list of 400 dissenting scientists, then 700 plus, and 1,000 plus, many of them former UN. And so then I went off on my own and started Climate Depot with the stated goal of providing a realistic basis for climate, energy, and environment news. And that's what I've been doing now for quite a while. I've also done 2 movies, Climate Hustle 1, Climate Hustle 2, and I'll be showing clips of Climate Hustle 2 with actor Kevin Sorbo. He's in the movie, he won't be with me in Minnesota, but he'll be up in North Dakota. We'll be showing clips of that, and also my book, Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change, and the Green Fraud, Why the Green New Deal is Worse Than You Think.
Wow.
That's quite the extensive resume. Appreciate you sharing with us.
Yes.
Can you kind of explain to our viewers how they have kind of taken this whole issue and kind of, I think you had used those terms in the past, they've kind of weaponized the weather.
Yeah, they have. What's happened with the whole climate change debate? First of all, if you go back 50 years, we've had environmental scares ranging from the overpopulation scare to the man-made global cooling scare to resource scarcity to the Amazon deforestation to species extinction. But when climate came along, and it really came along, by the 1990s, it was around late 80s, the United Nations formed their climate panel in 1988, but it really didn't kick into gear until Al Gore did his film, Inconvenient Truth, 2006, and won the Nobel Prize. And then you had President Obama come in with cap and trade. That's really when it came on the international scene of real weight and importance. But essentially, the United Nations in 1988 formed a climate panel, which is actually a political body posing as a science organization. And their gist of it is they have to find that carbon dioxide, what we exhale from our breath, is a toxic pollutant, essentially. And or if they don't find that CO2 is driving a climate catastrophe, they don't have a reason to exist. They don't get to go to scientific conferences, and they don't get to be in charge of the solution through United Nations agreements. So in order to do that, the United Nations is the source of so much of this corruption of science. They have weaponized every weather event: hurricane, tornado, flood, drought, despite the fact that all of these extreme weather events are either no trend or declining trends on climate timescales, 50 to 100 years. They've weaponized them all to say, look, a tornado in Oklahoma, that's proof of climate change. A hurricane, that's proof. We warned you there'd be hurricanes, despite the fact that they're less, the severe weather has actually declined or is no different. This is how they do it. We have people like Chuck Schumer tell the United States Senate on the Senate floor, we know that if we'd done more on climate change, these hurricanes would be less severe. They are literally hearkening back to the medieval witch trials, where people actually believed witches change the weather, witches cause crop failures, witches need to be persecuted, witches need to be stopped. That's what they're saying now, except they're going after our SUVs, air conditioning, meat eating, and capitalism, essentially. They now say that we have to save the planet essentially by going Marxist. And the UN doesn't even try to disguise this anymore. They want a complete top-down, centrally planned economy where every aspect of your life is controlled by the climate. And that's where we are right now. And that's why this is such a shocking thing to see, when I say a lot of Republicans in Washington, the Republican leadership does not really fight back against this narrative. They just try to Me Too Republican and go along with it.
Thank you for saying that, because we're seeing that over and over in all kinds of areas where the Republican body kind of forgets that they have a job there to fight back,
Yes.
to hold some of this back. And they're seeming like, oh, we're working together and we're going to find the solution. And we hear all that, but it's like, where's the ones that'll step up and say, no, this is bogus? But I just have to ask you, in your research and over the years, have you seen, do you think there's anyone involved in this whole climate fiasco that is doing it for reasons that they really do believe that we're going to all die in the next 10 years or whatever it is now? Or is it the people in power, it's all about getting that great reset, that one world government on the board and being done with it?
Well, there's many motivations. And yes, I have. I mean, there's a guy from NASA named Peter Kalmus. Actually, Leonardo DiCaprio is touting this scientist for his new Netflix film about a comet, essentially likening the comet catastrophe in the fictional movie to the real climate disaster. But here's a NASA scientist, Peter Kalmus, I've written about, who literally has gone dumpster diving in order to prevent a climate catastrophe. He's literally blamed climate change on white supremacy. He is a complete alarmist. He essentially seems to be mentally unstable. So you have true believers like that. And then you have attention seekers, people like former NASA scientist James Hansen, who's probably a true believer as well, but he gets arrested protesting global warming half a dozen times. He gets awards from the Heinz Foundation, John Kerry's foundation, back in 2004, then endorses John Kerry for president. So you have the people that are financially motivated, ideologically motivated, emotionally motivated. And then you have the United Nations, Al Gore, and I think Al Gore is probably a true believer, but he's also on a quest to be the world's first carbon billionaire. And he's now on a quest to be the world's first fake meat billionaire. Al Gore is pushing that. And the one thing that's interesting about all these players, they're not just trying to warn us, oh, here's a catastrophe coming, we need to change our ways. They're saying the catastrophe is coming and here's how you must change your ways. There's no time for debate. Al Gore literally said these are all the companies government should be investing in. In 2008, guess what? Obama won and invested in all of Al Gore's companies. Al Gore became very rich. And this is what's happening with the United Nations as well. They don't want to give us any choice. They want to come in and be in charge of the solution. They want to be in charge of huge climate funds. They want to be in charge of global governance, in their word. So it's an incredible thing. They're using this climate crisis, in their words, it's not a crisis, but the way they've used COVID. I mean, the COVID, as Jane Fonda said, was God's gift to the left because it gave progressives everything they wanted: immediate power, getting rid of democracy, unelected bureaucrats ruling, doing what they think is right, shutting people down, stopping movement of people, weddings, barbecues, backyard events, essential services. You can't leave your home unless government tells you. That was their dream. So that's what motivates. Climate has the financial, ideological, emotional, attention seeking. It's all wrapped up. There's really no one single motivation for this whole climate movement.
Wow, it's just crazy. Now, I know you have a book, and it's called The Green Fraud. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my book came out right after AOC, came on the scene. This was released earlier, actually this year, but now 2020. It was released in March of 2021. It's got a foreword by Mark Stein, which is worth reading for that. But essentially, I go through the entire history of this green movement. And what's shocking, my favorite chapter is where I talk about overpopulation, man-made global cooling. Literally in the 1970s, they were talking about hurricanes and floods and wildfires being caused by man-made global cooling. They thought our fossil fuels were blocking out the sunlight and creating global cooling. But the solutions were exactly the same: wealth redistribution, sovereignty limiting treaties, restrictions on capitalism, central control of your lives by government bureaucrats. Nothing has changed. So all global warming is the latest environmental scare with the exact same solutions going back 50 years. And I show you how the Green New Deal sounds exactly like what they proposed in the 1970s to deal with global cooling. The Green New Deal sounds exactly like what the United Nations has put forth with their Sustainable Development Agenda at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. Nothing is new. There's nothing new about the Green New Deal. And that's essentially the book goes through that. And it also deals with the whole child issue, which any parent out there, they're weaponizing kids to turn against their parents and turning kids into suing the European governments, the US government for harming their climate future. So the book goes into all that. It goes into the COVID climate connection. And I go through the entire A to Z on climate science as well, all the weather, CO2 levels. We're actually one of the lowest CO2 levels in the geologic history of the Earth right now.
So why are they giving a pass to some of the worst violators on the planet? India, China,
Yeah.
you know, it's like totally bogus to me. And to see that it seems to be like you said, the elite, the Leonardo DiCaprios, the Al Gores, it's more like they're looking for whatever will make a buck.
Yeah, it is. What the United Nations has done is said China, India, all these developing world countries, and China, obviously, huge economy, don't have to follow any of these UN treaties. So what does that mean? China loves this whole UN process. China's made some vague promises down the road that their emissions will top out. Meanwhile, the United States goes and we give aggressive targets that'll hammer our people, despite the fact that John Kerry says it would have no impact on the climate, even if the United States zeroed out our emissions. It would have no impact on emissions, global emissions, because of the developing world. So this is one of the issues we're dealing with. And China, of course, loves this whole process because we rely on China for 90% of our solar panels. We rely on China for the rare earth mining. And this is what we're facing. China is going to benefit. The reason Russian leader and Saudi Arabia was not at this recent UN summit is Joe Biden was doing his bidding. US is begging OPEC to increase oil production. Russian oil imports are nearing record high. And we're now relying back on the Middle East because we shut down American energy, and we're going to be relying on China now for rare earth mining to meet all these green energy mandates that even people like Michael Moore, the progressive left-wing filmmaker, says is a sham. And he did a whole movie, and that's in my book, detailing Michael Moore. I love to get liberals criticizing other liberals because I think that's very effective for people to understand what's really going on.
Right. And is there any of the countries involved in the United Nations that are willing to stand up and say, wait a minute, these pieces just don't fit? And we just have a little bit of time here, but...
Czech Republic, I interviewed Václav Klaus for the book and for my film Climate Hustle 2. One of the few leaders willing to stand up. I mean, he actually says that the greatest threat to freedom and liberty since the fall of the Soviet Union is what he calls ambitious environmentalism, coming from the United Nations, coming from the climate agenda. He's seen it all before. He calls it masterminding from above. In other words, we have climate activists now telling us we can't fly in a climate emergency unless it's morally justifiable. So there's been very few countries. Obviously, Donald Trump, when he was president, was a fantastic example. Brazil is another country that stands up to the UN and doesn't accept the narrative and fights them. But and if India has stood up, their environmental minister has said we're not going to sign on to any UN emission limiting treaty when nearly 40% of our residents live in dire poverty. They need development in these countries, and they're not going to let a UN agenda do it, stop them.
Okay.